Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great December with the holiday season coming upon us. I hope everybody's in the spirit and don't forget to continue to work. I know when I was in production, the month of December was always a very good month for me because my clients, the clients that were out there looking, were very serious and wanted not only to buy but close before the end of the year. So, keep reaching out to your clients and find out what their motivation is and if they have an interest in either selling their home and moving on or even purchasing a new home. So now's the time to touch base with all of your clients. This is the time of year where you can reach out for a number of different reasons, not just real estate, but also happy holidays. You know, I know a ton of my clients had birthdays or anniversaries in December as well. So keep that in mind. Use that as a good opening dialogue for you when you do reach out to wish your clients happy holidays, and make sure that you do take care of them and either close, find out what their motivation is, and then help them to that motivation. Today I'm going to be talking about seller non-agency agreement and buyer non-agency agreement. As you all know, I'm a big advocate of the agency, and when you use an agency with your buyer, it's a great way to establish a relationship and a fiduciary responsibility to that client. Now, in doing that, should anything come up with regards to procuring cause, agency in and of itself won't win a procuring cause case for you, but it'll go a long way on your side and in your favor. So I've been through enough of these cases before to know that one of the first questions they ask is, do you have an agency agreement completed with this client? And so please, going into 2019, is a great time for you to just get into the habit of getting that agency signed with your buyer before you take them out and start showing them property. That way, it's a step in your direction to protect your commission should the need arise. So, the reason I chose these two documents today is because I've had a couple of our agents call me, a couple of my agents call me, excuse me, and their clients wanted to go look at a FSBO. So, they said, how do I protect myself? And the best way to protect yourself with the seller is through a seller non-agency agreement. Most FSBOs are out there because they don't want to pay the commission on the selling side. So your first step in a FSBO contact is to call the seller, the FSBO seller, and establish somewhat of a relationship or a rapport with them over the phone. Let them know you have a client that's interested in viewing their property, and would they allow you to view that property with your client? And obviously they're going to say yes, we'll do that. The next step is to talk to them, and you have to do this before you go to view the property. You have to establish what the commission will be for you prior to giving out your buyer's name, number one, and number two, establishing what your commission will be should your buyer decide to take the next step in writing an offer and getting that offer accepted. So you want to do that in writing and to secure your commission. You want to have a single party compensation agreement completed and signed by the seller. The single party compensation to broker will establish, number one, the property address, the seller's name. It includes the buyer's name and the amount of commission that will be that our agent, you, will be compensated should that buyer decide to write an offer, and through those negotiations, should that offer be accepted and placed into escrow. So again, do the single party compensation agreement. One, before you give out the buyer's name, and two, before you show the property. Once you've established the commission structure, because going into the beginning, you don't know the seller may change their mind up front and say, hey, will you do a dual agency with me? They won't use that term, but they'll say, will you represent me as well? And so you want to make sure when you establish what agency you're going to have, either single or dual, that you're going to be rightly compensated for the amount of work and the amount of legal responsibility you have in handling this transaction. If the seller says, I do not want dual agency, I will represent myself, then what are your obligations as representing the buyer only? Number one, in terms of disclosure to the seller, so the seller clearly understands and signs off on it, so you're protected. And number two, what can you do and what you can't do? The seller non-agency agreement covers all of that. It's a great form, and it also establishes, the question I get when it comes to buyer representation only with a FSBO is, can I provide documents to the seller so that they can complete them and provide information back to my buyer? The answer to that is yes. As long as you have the seller non-agency agreement, you can provide the seller with all the documentation they need to complete, sign, and return to you as well as your buyer to establish the condition of the home. Anything that needs to be disclosed needs to be disclosed. And that's all covered here in the seller non-agency agreement. It actually states in here that even though you, the agent, are providing the documentation to the seller, you are not representing them. You are not representing them when it comes to the negotiations between the buyer and the seller, that you are representing the buyer only. It states in here, there's a warning to the seller in here that should they have questions, that they need to go seek their own representation, whether that be with a licensed real estate professional or with an attorney. Again, that's all in the document that they sign off on, so it fully discloses to them your role as a single agent in a FSBO type or for sale by owner type transaction. When it comes to representing the buyer only, again, you only have the fiduciary responsibility to the buyer, not to the seller. So that's all covered in this. So again, use this seller non-agency agreement. It's relatively straightforward. If you have any questions, and I'm not going to go through this and tell you how to fill it out. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. So all you need to do is go through it. If in reading it you have a question, contact your broker, ask that question, get a clarification if you need that, and make sure that you complete this. Get the seller to agree to a commission to you first. Second, get this seller non-agency agreement signed so that you'll have the ability to protect yourself should the seller come back to you at a later date and say, hey, I wasn't properly informed, I had no idea what I was doing, this agent didn't do a good job, and I feel like I've been taken advantage of. So again, this protects you. Buyer non-agency agreement. Again, when you have a seller and you have the listing, you're doing an open house. A buyer comes in and says, hey, I'm not represented by any other agent, and I don't want any other agent, and I don't want to work with you because in my negotiations with the seller, I want to be able to save money. Hopefully the seller will see that and I'll be able to negotiate a better price. We've all heard that, we've all seen that, most of us have experienced it. So what you need to do in a buyer non-agency agreement is the same as the seller's non-agency agreement, but the shoe's on the other foot. It just clearly states here that you represent the seller and the seller only. The buyer is on their own. The warning is there that should any questions arise, they need to seek competent advice from either a licensed real estate professional or an attorney. And again, you can provide the buyer with the documents, a purchase agreement for them to complete and provide you to present to your seller. Again, that's all listed and stated right here in the buyer non-agency agreement. But the important part of all of this is that you are establishing that you only represent the seller, your fiduciary responsibility is only with the seller, and that the buyer beware. And that's exactly what this is stating. Have the buyer sign it. and don't present the offer to the seller until you get this buyer non-agency agreement signed. So if you are providing, for example, the RPA to the buyer, along with that RPA, you let them know that you are going to include this buyer non-agency agreement and that it must be signed at the time they present the offer to you so that you can pass it on to the seller. There is one other document I'm just going to briefly mention here. It's called the commission agreement. And it's not a buyer-broker agreement. That's another form that can be used to protect your commission. The commission agreement, same thing. It protects you from and your commission based on what you negotiate with the seller. The commission agreement, the buyer broker agreement is obviously with the buyer. The commission agreement is with the seller. So if you have a neighbor, a friend, a relative who wants to sell their home but doesn't want to list it, but if you provide a buyer to them, they're willing to agree to a commission to be paid to you. Again, go ahead and pull up the commission agreement, have it completed, and present it to the seller for their review, approval, and signature. That pretty much covers it for today. Going into next year, when I do my monthly documentation with regards to compliance and documents, I am going to include a segment starting in January 2019, just a reminder on your business plan. You know, are you contacting your past clients? How are you doing it? Are you doing it consistently? And other forms of contact that will hopefully help you increase your database, increase your activity level, and as a result of that, increase your income and profitability. So with that, I wish you all a happy holiday season. Be safe. Any questions that come up, please contact the broker in your area. And I look forward to 2019. I think 2019 is going to be a great real estate year for all of us. We are going to have to work. It's not going to be an easy year. But I think if you're willing to get out there and work hard and do what you need to do to build your business, you will be a success. Thank you and have a great rest of the week.